Hey, I'm 30 years old and go by Jake. Though I never would have dreamed I would be recounting this, here I am revealing the most gut-wrenching and eye-opening chapter of my life. It all began with Rachel, my former lover, now 27. Having grown up together and after years of friendship, we began dating in our early 20s. We were supposed to be together, and I felt we were unbeatable. During 5 years of dating, everything felt right. Actually, I thought I was creating a future with her. We had discussed marriage, children, and the 9 yards all around. It was her who was unique, or so I thought. Rachel was indeed my rock during some of the most trying events of my life. When I lost my job, and when my dad experienced a serious medical crisis, she helped me in ways I could never really articulate. Our friendship seemed strong. Sure, we had ups and downs, but what relationship lacks? I felt that nothing could separate us, particularly not following all we had gone through. But then things started to turn around. The first blow arrived unannounced, like a punch to the gut I had not seen approaching. One stranger called Zoe sent me a note. She was not someone I knew, not even someone I had heard of before, and the message she sent had enough power to stop me cold-blooded. It was an allegation. Rachel had been cheating on me with some person called Liam, not simply with anyone. Though I had no idea who Zoe was or why she was getting in touch, her comments really rocked me to my very core. It was a bombshell not for which I was ready. I will confess that my initial response was incredulity. It didn't make sense. Rachel was everything to me. She had always been there. How could she turn on me in this way? Though Zoe looked satisfied, she provided me some screenshots of messages between Rachel and Liam. It seems to be more than a one-time occurrence. These were not merely notes between buddies. They were scathing, flirty, and personal. Then came a video of Liam candidly discussing his romance with Rachel, even noting the likelihood that the kid she was carrying would be his. What I was witnessing eluded me in terms of processing. The lady I had loved for years, who had been my rock, seemed impossible to think could be capable of this degree of treachery. Unquestionably, though, the evidence was strong. Zoe's assertions were not mere hearsay. It struck me like a goods train. Rachel had been cheating on me for 2 years. 2 years of liens. 2 years of me totally in the dark, believing we were creating a future together. The next day, Rachel returned home, her face ablaze with enthusiasm. She had some news to offer after just getting back from her folks' residence. Her eyes gleamed with what I now understood as shame as she looked at me and said, "Jake, I'm pregnant. I ought to have been glad for her and for us, but I wasn't. Not these days." Rather than cheering, I just stared at her while my head whirled, trying to make sense of what was occurring. Not when I understood what I knew, but not even now could I grasp her words. "We need to discuss," I murmured, my voice steady but chilly. She seemed perplexed, and I doubt she completely understood the weight of what was about to transpire. We were walking to her mother's house. I told her I wanted a neutral environment where I could get the truth out of her, not fight at home. I worked the phrase in my thoughts as we drove. How could I possibly face her about this treachery? Though my head was running 1,000 ideas, I knew one thing for sure. I had to hear it right from her mouth. Reality. Rachel rushed right into her happy news, informing her mother we were expecting a baby when we got to her place. To listen to her, the delight in her voice was intolerable. Though I had no choice, I wasn't sure how I would approach her mother about breaking it. Cutting her off, I added, "I know everything." Though I could not hold back anymore, the words felt weighty coming out of my mouth. Shock caused Rachel's eyes to enlarge. She faltered in her speech. "What precisely do you mean?" I showed her the screenshots, the video, the damning proof of her affair when pulling out my phone. At first, she said nothing, but I could see the color fade from her face. Her mother's look shifted from enthusiasm to incredulity very fast. Rachel began to stutter as she tried to explain, but no justification could make this right. Her mom was enraged. Turning on Rachel, she screamed at her for souring our connection. She betrayed me. Still the manipulator, Rachel sought to defend herself by claiming it was a mistake. "That wasn't like that, Jake. There was an error." I perplexed myself. She begged, "I'm sorry. I was not, however, buying it." A mistake? 2 years is not enough to allow a mistake. A mistake does not call for dishonesty and lies. "Rachel, this was not a mistake. You chose this." My voice trembled with sadness mixed with wrath. Never in my life had I been this enraged. Then, as if it would solve everything, she tried one last-ditch effort to save face by volunteering to end the pregnancy. "I'll throw away the baby, Jake. I will do anything it takes. Just do not abandon me. This is something we can correct." But it was already too late. I completed it. We were done. I handed her my stuff, packed it in a bag, and said so. No turning back was possible. She implored me to change my mind, but I couldn't. I left Rachel and her mother to handle the mess she had produced walking out. She no longer made sense. There was no repair for the damage done. I left her house that evening heartbroken. I considered the years I had spent with her, and the memories now marred with treachery. More than anything, though, I was furious. Mad at Rachel for lying to me for so long, angry at myself for not noticing the symptoms earlier, and furious at the world for making me feel so stupid. Rachel had disproved my wish to believe the best of others. Along with any future we might have had, my faith in her vanished. Strangely, life can change in the space of a blink. One day, you are living your best life, believing everything is good and wonderful. Then the next day, all you believed was real collapses all around you. The shock of Rachel's betrayal was still registering when Zoe, yes, the one who delivered that startling note, decided to exacerbate things. The reality flooded me, and I was drowning in it. You could be wondering why initially I took Zoe's message seriously. I knew nothing about her, and I most definitely did not trust a stranger making such a delicate allegation. Still, for some reason, her words really connected with me. It was timing. Not only what she said. For the past few months, I had been living in a fog. All of a sudden, the fog cleared, and I first could see everything clearly. Over the past 3 months, Rachel and I had been drifting more apart, but I wrote it off as life's hardship. For every one of us, work, family, and the customary presented challenges, nothing I could manage, nothing that cried out cheating to me. I therefore assumed it was some twisted prank when Zoe initially got in touch. She began then giving me screenshots, texts, talks, pictures, evidence Rachel had been hiding from me a whole other life, though I felt I knew her better than anybody else. Here I was staring at communications proving something was wrong rather than merely suggesting it. A note from Liam, the man Zoe had described, made up the first screenshot. "Can't wait to see you tonight, sweetheart," the straightforward text said. "I have missed you rather extensively. Like old times, let us make it happen." I stopped when I saw it. My brain tried to sort it out. Might there be some misinterpretation here? Perhaps all they were pals. Nevertheless, I could not fool myself anymore. The writings were overly private and personal, and then arrived the second screenshot. Rachel and Liam had a back-and-forth discussion whereby it was abundantly evident that this was not only an affair, their relationship had been totally committed. Rachel had been meeting him, chatting with him when she ought to have been with me, surreptitiously slipping behind my back. Still, the book where Rachel admitted she was pregnant absolutely tore me apart. She continued, "Liam, I'm afraid. Should Jake learn, what would happen?" That phrase sliced through me like a knife. I cannot lose you either, but I cannot lose him. She got pregnant after hiding the fact and trying to manage both of us simultaneously. Having Liam with me, what was real now, eluded me. But the last nail in the coffin turned out to be a video Zoe emailed me. Though I'm not sure how she came upon it, Liam was seated in his car discussing his relationship with Rachel. He was all grins, obviously pleased with himself. The worst thing about it is he chuckled about it and said casually, "How the kid might be mine." I twisted in my gut. The man I assumed to be just some hapless man was suddenly laughing about something far from a comedy, in my opinion. I was not able to breathe. My universe seemed to be falling apart right under me. I had given Rachel my trust. She was loved by me. And today I hardly knew her at all. This was not the woman with whom I had many memories. The woman who had been my partner was not this one. This was someone else. Someone who had deceived and misled me and made me appear like a moron. I had to face her, though. I had to test whether she would tell me the truth straightforwardly. Rachel returned from her parents' place the following day, all smiles and seemingly unaltered. "Jake, I've got some big news," she said. I wasn't sure what type of news she expected I would be pleased about. Perhaps she assumed I would overlook all else since I would be so happy with the baby. I was not, however, buying it. Not right now. I stared at her as soon as she sat down and, without thinking, stated, "I know about Liam. I am all-knowing." Her face turned pallid. I considered her perhaps passing out for a second. She fumbled, attempting to find out her reply. What? In what sense? Showing her the screenshots, the video, everything? I brought out my phone. Her eyes opened to view what I was holding. Her face lost color and I could see panic in her eyes. At first she said nothing, just stared at me, most likely thinking I was kidding. However, I wasn't. She broke down then as well. She tried to clarify, but she couldn't find any language to undo the harm. She informed me it was a mistake and she hadn't meant things to have progressed this far. But, given 2 years, how could she say it was a mistake? How could she rationalize something that had been ongoing for so long? Her apologies were feeble, even pathetic. She admitted she was perplexed, that Liam made her feel unique, that she had no idea what she was doing. Not one of those things, though, bothered me. What counted was her dishonesty to my face, years of hiding the truth from me, and betrayal of what we had created together. My voice quivering with hurt and rage, I shouted, "Don't you dare try to justify it, Rachel. A mistake does not linger 2 years. You gave a decision, and you will now be living with it." Though it was too late, she begged me to pardon her. She had already passed me. Then she delivered the bombshell. "I'll get rid of the baby, Jake. I will stop at nothing to correct this." I had no desire in mending anything, though. How might I mend something broken beyond repair? I had loved her, trusted her, and today she had broken everything. I said coldly, "I'm done." Getting up and reaching for my stuff, "It ends." That day when I left the door, I felt as though my entire universe had inverted itself. Rachel had returned lies and dishonesty when I had given her everything, my trust, my love. I lost faith in her and wondered whether I would ever be able to believe anyone once more. I turned around, not looking back. I cannot. This marked the end of a chapter, and the connection I had believed would last a lifetime. I knew one thing for sure. I would never allow myself to be duped once more, but I was not sure what next. Her mother's house seemed far away, and the quiet between us seemed weighty and oppressive. The trip felt limitless. Rachel still lacked awareness of the approaching tempest. Her eyes gleamed with enthusiasm, and I could see the hope I would bring about in her. All I could focus on, though, was the treachery I had lately discovered. How could she be so insensitive to the suffering she was going to inflict? Rachel leaped out of the car when we got here, anxious to tell her mother her news. I trailed after, like a stranger in my own life. Rachel jumped right into her announcement as her mother welcomed us cheerfully. "Mom, I'm pregnant," she exclaimed with great clarity. As her mother drew Rachel into a close hug, her cheeks burst with delight. I stood there, as though I were suffocating right then. This was not intended to be like, I was not intended to be the one who had to bust the illusion or kill her happiness with the truth. But I could not pretend anymore. I could not stand there and see her savoring a falsehood. My voice was calm, but the rage building inside me made my hands quiver as I cleared my throat and said, "Rachel, we need to talk." Confused and still ignorant of what I knew, she glanced at me. "I know everything," I said, seeing her countenance change from joy to a puzzled frown. "Everything?" Her voice quivering somewhat, she asked. I wanted not to do this. Though I had no choice, I did not want to be the one to ruin her world. Like I had, she had to confront the facts. I drew out my phone and showed her the proof without uttering another word. Between her and Liam, the signals. Liam's video boasting about their affair and discussing how the child might be his. I watched as her eyes flew back and forth between me and the TV while the color faded from her face. Her mother, who had been standing by grinning, suddenly froze in surprise. Her face contorted in incredulity. She looked toward Rachel. "Rachel, what is this?" she insisted, her voice getting higher. Rachel resembled a deer trapped under lights. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. She had obvious shame on her face, and I saw no more lying was needed. She knew, as I knew the truth. Jake, it's not what you think," Rachel said at last, stammering. She reached for me, but I turned away, the rage rising in my breast. "You are correct. It's not what I thought," I said, my voice low but firm. "It's worse. Rachel, for 2 years you have been lying to me. I was an idiot 2 years ago. You have been cheating on me, and today I learn you are pregnant. But not my child, is it?" Rachel's face crumpled, and for a split second I considered her perhaps breaking down to tell me the truth, but then she tried to justify herself like she often did when things became too difficult. Jake, I had no intention of this happening. There was a mistake, she begged, sounding shaky, a moment of weakness. A mistake? I said again, my voice growing incredulous. A mistake does not linger 2 years. A mistake does not call for dishonesty and betrayal. Rachel, you made this decision. You selected him. You opted to turn on me. Her mother said nothing, clearly disappointed on her face. Although I knew seeing her daughter that way was killing her, I couldn't spare Rachel any more pity. She was not deserving of it. Tears welled in Rachel's eyes as she reached out once again, her voice faltering as she begged, "Please, Jake. I regret it. I never meant to hurt you. I'll straighten it. I will do all necessary to correct this." I shook my head while my heart hammered in my chest. Rachel, no, it's finished. You already have destroyed this. You destroyed us. I stared down at the ground for a little while, inhaled deeply to ground myself. You believe you could make this right with an apology? Saying you'll get rid of the baby helps to clarify. Not one thing will change from that. The face of Rachel turned in terror. She bent down to grab my hands. Please do not abandon me, Jake. I am ready to do anything. Should your desired outcome be an abortion, I will do it. I'll write everything. But I finished. My heart was broken, and there was no going back. No, it is not with reference to the infant. It's about your lying to me and making me believe everything was good while you were off with him. It is done. Pulling my stuff from her mother's house, I retreated. As I left the door, I turned not once back. I failed. That existence had closed its door permanently. Driven home in a trance, my thoughts whirled with all that had just happened. I kept going back in my brain to Rachel's expression as she tried to defend herself, her desperation to hang on to something that was already gone. Though primarily I felt empty, I could still feel the rage boiling inside me. With everything, I had trusted her. She had also thrown everything away. The truth of what had transpired began to settle in. It went beyond a mere affair. It went beyond only the pregnancy. She lied. Years I had spent with her, convinced of something unreal. The damage was so profound, I had no idea how to deal with it. Though all I could feel was the weight of treachery weighing down on me, I wanted to be enraged. I trusted her and had loved her. And lately, I had no idea who she was. I thought I knew, but someone capable of the worst type of betrayal replaced her. From this, there was no going back. There are no more justification now. Not more opportunities. Rachel had chosen. Now I had to make mine. Walking away was not the toughest aspect. I came to see that all I had believed was a falsehood. I had to then reconstruct my life from the wreckage she left behind. The way life shifts in a split second is weird. All seems safe and predictable 1 minute. The ground under you then seems to have been ripped away. That's how I felt when the treachery of Rachel came down. I had no idea what to do the first few days after leaving her mother's place. My feelings ran on a roller coaster. Anger, uncertainty, grief, all mixing together, each wave more potent than the next. Still, events did not stop there. No, Rachel found it difficult to release. It made no difference how many times I blocked her phone or turned aside her calls. She kept returning. The messages continued unabated. They were first simply plain calls asking me to forgive her, to give her an opportunity to explain, not anything more than basic requests. She claimed to have made a mistake. That had all been a brief episode of weakness. She insisted on having me undo her. Reading those messages or knowing she didn't realize the seriousness of what she had done. What hurt more? Understanding the suffering she brought about, she was not seeking pardon. Not wanting to cope with the fallout from her acts, she was seeking pardon. Nevertheless, I was done. She changed strategies finally. It was her pals, not only Rachel anymore. They began emailing me as well, bombarding my inbox with messages accusing me of being merciless and warning me I was gravely wrong not giving Rachel another chance. How could I be so frigid? How could I be so mean to someone bearing my child? It was unbearable. I tried to ignore them, but the sheer weight of the messages was difficult to get away from. They showed up via calls, text messages, and even social media. Some of Rachel's friends went so far as to leave remarks on my posts challenging my integrity. I was being portrayed as the villain, the one devoid of sympathy for the mother of his child. Actually, it was not about the child. I wanted nothing for the child to suffer through. Actually, though, This child was not even mine. Rachel had betrayed me. No matter how hard I tried to make sense of it, I couldn't reconcile her behavior. Though her friends saw it differently, they were overly preoccupied defending her and blaming me for not being there for her as needed. I tried first to ignore it all. I reasoned that it would vanish if I simply stayed away. Still, it didn't. Not only with Rachel, but also with her friends for allowing this mess. I discovered daily growing frustration. Things truly hit me one day when a text from Rachel's lawyer arrived, claiming Rachel had retained them for child support. The correspondence came from a law firm. The book itself was unambiguous. Rachel, despite my not being the child's father, was requesting financial support for him. The boldness of it all startled me. After all had transpired, how could she believe she had any right to ask me for anything? I was outraged. I will not lie. Not even could I think clearly. Determined to permanently stop all of this, I phoned the number right away. I laid it out when the attorney responded. The affair, the film, the correspondence. I let go without thinking twice. I made it plain that I was not the father, and that I was not about to be under any kind of financial commitment. The way the attorney answered startled me. He was not straightforwardly dismissive or hostile. Rather, he asked whether I would be amenable to a mediation session with Rachel. Rachel was in a difficult place, he added, and she wasn't ready to accept the truth of her circumstances. He even advised her she could choose to settle things quietly, without involving legal action. I startled myself. Amiable. After everything? Why Rachel would be seeking any kind of calm after so completely abandoning me eluded me. Then it dawned on me. She was not seeking peace. She sought a path out of the mess she had produced. She expected me to correct it, to be the swooping hero saving her. That was not going to happen, though. Not this time. I informed the attorney I had no inclination toward mediation. I wasn't going to let Rachel shape me into a fixated person. She had to tidy this mess without me. It was hers to fix. I had an unusual clarity when I hung up the call. I had pulled back under control. Still, Rachel's tenacity never wavered, even as I grew more resolved. She kept reaching out, using a different technique this time. Liam, the man she had been seeing, had let her, she stated. Being a parent did not appeal to him not. She was suddenly alone, without anybody to call upon. Saying she had nowhere else to go, she implored me once again. The only reason she was seeking assistance was because of the baby. I momentarily disagreed with her. Trying to guilt me into looking after her, she was using the pregnancy as power. I refused to let myself fall once more into that trap. I had to be strong. I had to keep ahead of her machinations and stop allowing them to define me. A few days later, I received a letter from Rachel's attorney. For this period, it was official. They accused me of emotional abuse when they were attending court for child support. That was a blow in the face. She had already controlled all around her, and now she was attempting to control the judicial system to acquire what she desired. It's unbelievable. Rachel would not go this far. She never would have thought, but I realized then that this went beyond the baby. This discussed control. Rachel was trying to shape the story and turn me into the villain so she would gain financial support from me and pity. Realizing how far she had fallen hurt, but I wasn't about to let her pull me down with her. I was not going to allow her to cause me guilt for something I had not done. And sure as hell wasn't going to let her control me into paying for a child not even mine. The whole thing seemed like a dream from which I was unable to wake up. Still, I kept moving ahead. I stayed attentive to my life and to my recovery. I came to see that practically emotionally, psychologically, and even legally, I had to let go of Rachel entirely. For us now, there was no future. The person I had adored vanished from the scene. Still left was someone dragging me down alongside her. Time allowed everything to calm down. Rachel stopped getting in touch, and the calls from her attorney started to fade, like a weight had been taken off my shoulders. Though it was difficult, I had at last reclaimed control over my life. Days stretched into weeks, and the relentless assault of legal threats and emotional manipulation started to wane. Still, the emotional toll had already left its mark, even if Rachel's messages had stopped. I was compelled to consider that my life had been inverted, not only with regard to the betrayal, but also with regard to Rachel, who had exploited my confidence to control and fool me in ways I could never have imagined. I had trusted her with everything. I felt I had covered all of it. I reasoned I could simply carry on. That was naive, though. The legal fight was still to start. Knowing I wasn't the father, Rachel had applied for child support. She seemed to be wreaking havoc in my life only to grasp onto me. The courts would need evidence. Hence, even if I couldn't let her drag me into this anymore, the process wasn't as simple as just saying no. That's exactly what I set out to do. Over the next 2 weeks, I compiled every payoff evidence I had: the text messages, the video of Liam bragging about his connection with Rachel, the social media contacts, and anything that demonstrated Rachel had lied and I wasn't the father. Though my attorney was on my side, I got trapped in her mess even with all the evidence. It seemed as though it followed me everywhere I went, unable for me to avoid. The court date grew closer, and I had to get ready for the unavoidable confrontation. Rachel would not turn back, as I knew. Though it was wrong, she had too much to benefit from this. She was merely attempting to dominate me, to make me keep playing her game, and I knew in the rear of my mind I was a nervous bundle on the day of the hearing. Though I knew what I had to do, it was all too real to see Rachel personally in that courtroom. Though it felt like I was revisiting the worst aspects of our relationship, it was just legal and public today. I inhaled deeply and headed into the courtroom, head held high. I was not going to let her once more control me. Rachel was already there, seated at the plaintiff's table, looking more hopeless than I had ever seen her. Her attorney was next to her, whispering softly, and she kept looking at me, most likely trying to see whether I would buckle under duress. Everything went quiet as the judge arrived. We both got up. I had to remind myself to keep cool. This was about facts, not about emotion now. My attorney started to show the gathered proof: text messages, videos, and even friend testimonial evidence from those who had seen Rachel's actions. Everyone could see everything all spread out. Rachel's attorney sought to refute allegations of emotional suffering and deception, but the judge's comments made it abundantly evident that the evidence was overwhelming. I didn't have the father role. I lacked accountability. My fight now was not this one. Rachel tried to keep it together when it was time for her to speak, but the gaps were showing. She explained in a gentle, unsteady voice how difficult her life had been since Liam had left her, and how she felt let down by everyone, including me. I wasn't buying it when she tried to depict herself as the victim, the one who had been wronged. She had made decisions. Now she had to live with the results. Though I managed my feelings, the bitterness in my chest surfaced as she talked. She was still working on situational manipulation even now. She had, however, lost her opportunity with me, and today she was dealing with the consequences of her actions. I came out ahead on the judge's ruling. There wouldn't be child support either. Rachel found herself empty-handed. A weird wave of relief hit me as I left the courtroom. At last, it ended. The court fight was over, and I could go on living. Still, it felt less like a victory. It seemed more like the end of a chapter I had never wanted to participate in. Rachel still lived out there, but she no longer controlled me. The emotional manipulation was gone. At last, I had escaped her trap. In the next days, I concentrated on recovering my life. Reestablishing the ties ignored during my time with Rachel, I started spending more time with friends and family. Though it was a long process, with every stride I felt a bit lighter. More like me. I was aware I still needed mending. I still carried the marks of the betrayal and the accompanying mistrust, but I also understood that I had recovered control, something no one else could have taken from me. Though I was not the same person I was before Rachel, I was growing to be someone stronger, someone who would not allow the past to define me. Perhaps, just perhaps, I was ready for something else. After everything, it was difficult to imagine that I had at last reached a point from which I could let go. Rachel's calls and messages all sought to hang on to something already gone. Though initially I believed that the feelings would pass with time, they did not. No matter how hard I tried to ignore it, they were like a wound that kept opening fresh and agonizing. I tried to tell myself Rachel had gone on, at least. Though I hadn't replied, her lawyer had sent a letter on the infant. No matter how much Rachel tried to control the circumstances, I was not going to battle for a child whose name was not mine. The worst aspect was her portrayal of me as the villain, as though my refusal to mend a relationship based on lies had caused offense. After a time, the lawyer's letters stopped arriving, and the silence felt oppressive. But in that quiet, I became free. I was not confined to a circumstance I had not chosen. One relationship based on dishonesty did not hold me down. Rachel's attempt at dragging me back in, using guilt and employing the baby, didn't succeed. I realized I was better off by myself, better off once more under control of my life. Rachel hadn't heard from me for weeks, and I wasn't sure if it made me feel relieved or offended. Anger was simpler. It motivated me to keep ahead. Nevertheless, the relief that required more time to become settled upon, I began once more paying close attention to myself, something I hadn't done in some time. While I was immersed in Rachel's turmoil, I got back in touch with friends and people I had put on wait. I rediscovered the loves, activities, and interests I had dropped for her. Though it wasn't simple and it didn't happen overnight, it was improvement. Then something happened out of the blue. I got to know someone fresh. It was not hurried, it was not scheduled. Still, she was unique. Being around her has something simple about it, something unforced. She went under Sarah. We just were. We did not try to be anything to one another. It was not about running from my history. It was not a rebound. It was only a fresh link, natural without regard to expectations. I had no need of contrasting her with Rachel or anybody else. Simply said, I liked getting to know her. We began our slow first conversation. There was no urgency to sort things out or rush about. Though not very sweet, Sarah was gentle. She did not attempt to play therapist or to mend me. She let me be. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt free to simply live. Still, there remained the residual uncertainty, even if I wanted to think everything was good. Again, could I trust? Could I truly allow someone else inside? I was not sure. I knew, though, I didn't have to figure it out immediately. Having someone who only wanted what I was ready to offer was just pleasant. I kept on, continuously, daily putting things ahead. Once more working on my career, I concentrated on the elements that anchored me. I was not the same person I had been before Rachel. Perhaps this was not such a negative thing. Nobody is flawless. I was not either. But I was learning, something I hadn't done in years, to put myself first. That Rachel was no longer in my life made no difference. That all I had once believed in had been destroyed made no difference. That I had survived counted most. I was still standing when I had emerged on the other side of this catastrophe. Perhaps also, just perhaps, that was sufficient. The past was lost. I was then at last prepared to advance,